TikTok, time to rock. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon to everyone who's watching from all around the world. I'm your friendly neighborhood philosopher, David Wood, and with me now, your name is spelled Artur, but you pronounce it just like Arthur. Is that correct?
That's true.
All
That's
right.
a Eastern European way of writing my name, but it is an English name, so just Arthur is fine.
All right. Now, before we jump into things here, we have to deal with the apostate prophet. Apostate prophet said, "I heard David became an atheist because he was convinced by apostate prophets. Very convincing insights. Big if true." Now, here's what's disturbing. The apostate prophet is Turkish.
That's
And we're
right.
going to be talking about some problems caused by Turkey. Is the apostate prophet trying to distract us from talking about these problems caused by Turkey?
Let's
Maybe.
hope not. Let's hope not.
All right, Arthur. So why don't you give us a quick introduction to yourself and to why you're interested in this particular topic?
Yeah, well, my name is Arthur. I'm Armenian, obviously, if those didn't notice by the way my last name is written and the IAN ending or IYAN ending there, the YAN ending. Armenians typically have an IAN or a YAN ending. I actually just got back from Armenia, beginning of the month. I was there for a year and a half with the goal and aim of starting an apologetics ministry, which has never existed. And the idea is to train folks in apologetics. I was in pastoral ministry for about 10 years. I too consider myself to be a philosopher since I have an MA in philosophy, but you have one up on me there, David.
I have two up on you because I
two
have
up
two,
on
I have two master's degrees so we're good.
There you go. There you go. Yeah, so I graduated from Talbot School of Theology, the MA in philosophy there. And those who are familiar with there, they tend to produce apologists. And so, yeah, I've been in pastoral ministry. My heart's always been in apologetics as well. So there's always been an apologetic bent to the way I do things. The reason why I'm interested in this because outside of the United States, particularly in that region of the world, faith, politics, your ethnic identity are all wrapped in one. Now, I was born in Armenia and I was raised there till I was 11 years old until my family immigrated to the United States. And I started following Christ when I was about 18 years old. So I wasn't brought up in the church or anything like that. When I figured more about Christianity and as I was researching various world religions, I became Christian. So my interest is there. My interest is there because I have family there. I'm very much connected, friends there, very much connected with Armenia and what goes on there. But particularly, there's an issue of faith here. We can go into the details of that and what that looks like. But yeah, that's about that. I try to do apologetics on my YouTube channel as well, Apologia Center. And I try to do more of a worldview. So it's not necessarily kind of honed in on one issue. Like David, you deal with Islam a lot. I'm trying to present the Christian worldview as it answers kind of questions about society. So there's some political stuff on there. There's just straight up apologetics and Bible stuff. So I just started putting some effort into that. So yeah.
And the link to Arthur's YouTube channel is in the description box for those of you who want to subscribe and check out his work. I'm looking right now at description of religion in Armenia. Let me read a few lines here, and you tell me if this is correct. Armenia was the first nation to adopt Christianity as a state religion, an event traditionally dated to AD 301. The predominant religion in Armenia is Christianity. Its roots go back to the 1st century AD, when it was founded by two of Jesus' 12 apostles, Thaddeus and Bartholomew, who preached Christianity in Armenia between AD 40 and 60. Over 93% of Christians in Armenia belong to the Armenian Apostolic Church, which is in communion only with the churches comprising Oriental Orthodoxy, of which it is itself a member. Is that all a correct assessment there?
Yes, yes, it is. Yes, it is.
And I have to say, I think lots of people in the West have heard of the Armenian genocide and maybe some Armenian people, but really have no clue whatsoever about anything beyond that. I would be surprised if 1/10 of 1% of Americans could find Armenia on a map. So I'm just gonna before we get started, just so people have an idea of what we're talking about, I will pull up. Let me get a map of Armenia here. This is not the best map in the world, but it'll help people see what we're talking about here. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, you see this now. That looks like it's right on the border between the area that's considered Europe and the area that's considered
Asia.
yeah. So what is that? Is that counted as
Eurasia.
Okay? All right. So it's right there on the border.
That's what it's called, yeah.
All right. So ladies and gentlemen, you can see right there. You've got the section in red there. That is Armenia, and then right beside it you have Azerbaijan, which is going to be important for what we're talking about right now. And then you have Georgia above that. Not terribly important for what we're talking about, but notice off to the left there, you've got Turkey and you've got Iran there. And so lots of interesting players here.
That's right.
All right. And you mentioned before we got started, you mentioned Greater Armenia. And so I just pulled up a map of Greater Armenia. So it looked like, how long ago was that? It looks bigger.
That depends what map you're looking at. It could be around the 1st century.
Yeah, it says
BC.
it says Roman Empire and Parthian Empire, so it's got to be pretty far back in the day.
Yeah. So that's yeah. So it's pretty back. As a matter of fact, that's a really good map you have up there. So we'll keep that and we'll use that because it's extremely important. Now, Armenia was at one point much larger than this. As a matter of fact, it went from the Caspian to the Mediterranean to the Black Sea. Part of Syria and Israel were actually under Armenian control. That's the largest the empire was, but typically Armenia was not kind of an empire. Historically, it's always been sandwiched about between really big empires like the Roman Empire and the Persian Empire. We've been around forever. So we've been around and in conflict with the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Greeks have come in through, right? Everyone after that, the Mongols came through, the Turks have come and gone, right? Like, well, they haven't really gone; they're still around. But and then the last empire that Armenia kind of had an issue with and was under the control of was the Communist Empire, the Russian Empire. So it's all been there. We're always been sandwiched in between all these things, and been big at times and small. The smaller at other times. Throughout history, it's complicated because Armenians, like, you've had also multiple empires that have been Armenian. For example, if people look up the Kingdom of Cilicia, which was I think around about 300 years in the region of Cilicia, modern-day Turkey, kind of southeastern Turkey. There was a Kingdom of Cilicia, Armenian Empire, and it was pretty involved in the Crusades, giving shelter to Crusaders as they were coming through and going down into the Israel region to fight the Islamic onslaughts there. So it's had different sorts of empires. Sometimes it was one, sometimes it was two, three, four. Generally, Greater Armenia, Lesser Armenia has been this dividing thing where we've seen it. What's unique about this map, I want people who are watching to pay attention to that region called Artsakh on the right-hand side of the screen as I'm looking at it. Okay.
Okay. I think I can point to it here. So, all right. Yeah. There we go.
So it's important because that's essentially where our conversations, going to revolve around this region called Artsakh and what's going on there right now.
All right. So the reason this is an important topic, and I got multiple requests in the comments section of various videos asking to comment on the current situation between Azerbaijan and Armenia. So this is a concern, but why don't you tell us why this became an important issue very, very recently? I mean, I guess it's been an important issue for a long time, but recently things flared up.
Okay, so let me take a step back and kind of go back to the late 80s, and then we'll go from there. In the mid to late 80s, this region called Artsakh has always been Armenian land, by the way. It's predominantly Armenian populated, has always been, with the exception of during some periods of time where you had some Azeris living there, Azeri Turks living there. Some Ukrainians have lived there. You have other indigenous people there, by the way, that don't have country, like Yazidis. You get this Talish group that's in Azerbaijan. So there's a lot of people group in that region that don't have nations, but they're ethnically diverse from one another. When the Soviet Union was collapsing, it was kind of on its last leg. The people of Artsakh Artsakh is also called Nagorno-Karabakh, by the way. I'm using the Armenian word for it. The people of Artsakh said, we want to have independence. We either want to join back with Armenia or we want to be our own independent republic. Now, as countries are breaking off from the Soviet Union, right? Like, you got to realize it's pretty intense time. And what ended up happening is that the Azeri government, the communist government of Azerbaijan, pretty much said no, and went on to take back control, right? To invade, saying, no, you've been in our borders, you are our land, regardless of who's living there. At that time, the population, it depends on what numbers you're looking at. Maybe it was 20% Azeri, 80% Armenian, with some minor percentages of other people groups. And so a war erupted. Now, that's in the 80s. I was born in 1985. I kind of remember the beginning of the war, and then I definitely remember the intense period of the war. We came to the United States in the mid-90s, and part of the reason why we came to the United States was because of the war. It was just chaos. Communism had fallen. Armenia pretty much went into this 4 or 5 year war. And then in 94, there was a ceasefire called. And there's been a ceasefire ever since. Occasional flare-ups, shooting back and forth. It's very difficult to determine who shot what, okay? Either side is going to say the other one shot first and broke, the ceasefire and all that stuff. Until July of this year. Now, mind you, I told you guys that I just got back from Armenia after spending a year and a half there. July of this year, Azeris pretty much launched an attack. This is unique, by the way, into Armenia proper. So not Artsakh, not the border where the fighting has traditionally happened, but into Armenia, which has never been the case. The war has never really been between Armenia and Azerbaijan. It's been between Artsakh and Azerbaijan, and Artsakh has been helped by Armenia, which was very interesting that a move like that would take place. It was a couple of days, it died down, and then September 27th, my birthday, my 35th birthday this year, news comes in that Azerbaijan has gone into a full kind of assault trying to take Artsakh. And that's where we've been ever since. There's been intense fighting, there's been rockets, there's been cluster bombs that have been dropped on the capital city. Today, this is very sad because I was in this church last year. There's an 19th century cathedral in Artsakh, in Shushi. Today it was bombed. There's a giant hole through it. There's a bunch of people that were inside of it. And this is the kind of stuff where you kind of look at it and you say, why are you guys bombing churches? Why are you guys bombing the civilian population, right? And so that's where we've been at. Now, there's a lot of global players here. People aren't really speaking up. That's part of the reason why we wanted to do this and comment on it, because People really need to be aware and speak up on this issue because, like I said, in that region, your religion, your ethnicity, all of it is tied up into one. So being a Christian nation sandwiched in between two Turkic Islamic nations, and now Iran is on the bottom, and we'll talk about why Iran is a unique player in this, and that might be kind of, for the American mindset, they might say, "What? This doesn't make any sense," but we'll explain kind of why, I hope.
All right, now let's see if let me pull up that other map because this is a more modern map here. But let me see if I've got this straight. So you have Armenia here, and off to the right there you have Azerbaijan. I'm looking at the statistics here on religion. Azerbaijan is 97% Muslim population, and Armenia is 97% Christian population. So you have a Christian nation right beside a Muslim nation, and the Soviet Union drew up some lines.
Yeah, arbitrarily, yeah.
And they put part of the Christian Armenian population within the border of Azerbaijan. Am I correct so far?
Yeah, so let me explain something here because it's very important. I wouldn't necessarily say the Soviet Union, okay? Stalin did this. Okay, this is very important. Now, everybody forgets, or maybe people aren't aware, Stalin is from the region. Stalin is not Russian ethnically. Stalin is Georgian, okay? He is from the region. As a matter of fact, if you read his biography and stuff like that, you will see that he has Armenian, Azeri friends who are involved with his whole communist kind of takeover. Now, why is that important? Partly because Artsakh tried to get independence in between 1918 to like 20-something, 2021, okay? Armenia had independence. Sometimes people call this the first Armenian Republic. Azerbaijan also had its independence. As a matter of fact, technically it becomes a nation in 1918. It doesn't really exist before that. Not saying the people group don't exist, but as a nation. Stalin chooses in the early 1920s to appease the Turks because they're signing all sorts of peace treaties and stuff like that, to put Artsakh into Azeri, within Azeri borders. I think, now this is my personal opinion, okay, take it for what it is. I also think part of the reason why he did this is so that Armenia wouldn't be large enough and Armenia wouldn't actually try to fight and gain independence. Because during this time, there's actually a 1-year republic. It's called the Republic of Syunik, southern Armenia. That's very close tied to Artsakh. If you notice the Armenian map, by the way, it's a map of a girl kind of facing towards Turkey. I don't know if you can see that kind of silhouette. So we would say kind of the hair and the neck, right, of this girl. Basically, it declared independence. Because it didn't want to be under communist Bolshevik rule. It lasted for about a year, and then they took over. They couldn't withstand the Soviets. Now, I think part of Stalin's thinking, again, this is just me, was to kind of divide the Armenian population and not let them be unified, considering that Artsakh has always been a region where they've defended the Armenian homeland, and the people there are rugged. The place is mountainous. As a matter of fact, it's called Mountainous Republic of Karabakh because it's extremely mountainous. So it's a very rugged place. The people are rugged. They're fighters. They're warriors. And they've seen many empires, like I said, come through. So again, it's not necessarily that the Soviets did it. It's that Stalin did it, right? A genocidal maniac, right, decided to do this, arbitrarily drop some lines, and then put it within Azerbaijan, still under Soviet rule. Even though it was under Azerbaijan, it had its own Soviet kind of commission. So Armenia had its own kind of Soviet leadership, Azerbaijan had it, but Artsakh had it as well, which should give us a hint that it was still operating autonomously from Azeri rule, namely because the large percentage of ethnic Armenian Christians there.
All right, so you have Christian Armenia, which goes back a long way. You have
Yeah.
Muslim Azerbaijan. Stalin drew up some lines and he put a an Armenian Christian territory within the border of Azerbaijan, but that wasn't working out too well according to the people, and so they were somewhat autonomous, even though they're officially within the border. They're still acting with autonomy. Then the Soviet Union collapses, and then these nations have to figure
So,
out what they're going to do.
so as it's collapsing, so in the mid 80s, there was already a movement in Artsakh saying we want independence and we want to be joined with Armenia. The idea has always been this was one country with Armenia, so we want to be joined with Armenia. But if that's not possible, we want to be our own republic. We want to govern ourselves. We don't want to be under Azeri rule. And they actually passed a referendum. They voted on it. Majority of the people said, yes, we want to be our own republic. Now, here's the funny thing. And if there's Azeris and Turks in the chat, I'm not really paying attention to that. But if there are, they're going to tell you, well, UN resolution, such and such number, recognizes Artsakh to be under, Azeri rule, and Armenia should accept that. This is kind of the story that keeps getting repeated from their side, right? The UN recognizes this, and Armenia should respect the wishes of the UN. Well, the UN is recognizing the arbitrary decision of a genocidal maniac, Stalin. That's really what's happening. And they're completely disrespecting and not recognizing a very basic God-given right to self-determination and self-rule. A people group have the right to say, we want to govern ourselves. We don't want to be under this country, this state. I mean, listen, we're Americans, right? Let's realize how much we love that ideology, the right to govern yourself. And that's what these people want. They want peace. They want to govern themselves in whatever way that they want to govern themselves. They have a right to that. And I don't think the international community is kind of respecting it. And I must say, there was kind of a difference in talk as of yesterday in the European Union, where a large kind of portion of representatives got up from different countries speaking on the issue and speaking about Turkey, as a matter of fact, supplying terrorists. This is where this situation has been elevated with Turkey's involvement from what it's been kind of in the early 90s. Okay, so Turkey's involved and invested into this, and they're actually supplying Syrian terrorists into this region to fight this war.
Syrian terrorists. Why do you think this is? This would be opinion, but why do you think this is all being stirred up right now?
Well, I think the Turkish leader, I kind of refrain from calling him president. I like to call him a dictator or leader or whatever. Is a psycho. He's a maniac, right? He wants a number of things. I think one of the things he wants is to bring back the glory days of Turkey in regards to the Ottoman Empire. That's one thing. I think another thing that's probably in his mind is a connection. It's a physical connection to all the Turkic nations, which is actually an ideology, if you look it up, that was really popular in the early 1900s called Pan-Turkism. And I think Erdogan, if you look at his involvement over the last 10 years in Syria, in Libya, in Yemen, in Iraq, you will see why, when you connect the dots, this is important and why their involvement is important. One of the other things is that Armenians are technically, historically, kind of a thorn in their flesh, not in the sense that Armenians are aggressors, but the fact that it's a constant reminder of the genocide they committed against us. And not just us, by the way, against Christians, against Assyrians and against Greeks, indigenous Christians of that land. I mean, the maps we looked at, if you look at it very closely, Eastern Turkey is Western Armenia. It's historic Armenian lands. 80% of the population was killed off in 1915, between 1915 and 1923.
And that also, the Armenian genocide, I've heard, actually provided the model for Hitler.
That's right.
That when he studied it, he found out, wow, you can actually massacre an entire population while the world sits there and watches. It can actually be done, and that's what actually showed him that it can be done.
What a lot of people don't realize is that there was German soldiers on the ground. As a matter of fact, most of the pictures that you will see of the genocide, a lot of pictures, we have surviving pictures you will see, was taken by a German officer in secret. So there's enough proof of this. There's correspondence going back and forth between the U.S. ambassador Henry Morgenthau. There's international conversation, newspaper clippings you can find of the New York Times talking about the massacre of the Armenians at the hands of the Ottomans, or the Young Turk regime at the time, Young Turks. So yeah, I mean, that's the case. Armenians are a nuisance, you could say. And the way Turkey sees it is that Azerbaijan is the same people group. There's the same Turks. They speak the same language. And Armenia is in between that connection.
Mm-hmm. You did have a question right here. Alan Rule said, can the guest explain what the Nakhichevan Autonomous Republic.
Nakhichevan, yeah.
Nakhichevan. I was close.
Nakhichevan. Yeah.
Now,
yeah, pretty good. It's okay.
when I saw the question, I tried looking it up, and it looks like that's that little area on the opposite side of Armenia that doesn't have a country label. So let me let me pull that back up.
Very interesting that you would ask this, considering my ancestors are from Nakhichevan. Now, the reason why I say this is because my ancestors, Armenians, are from Iran. They were taken there in the 1600s because the Persian Shah emptied Nakhichevan to stop Ottoman advancements and kind of burned down. Nakhichevan is very fertile and stuff like that, so burned the land, scorched it, so it would stop their advancement. Nakhichevan was a part of this whole conflict, as a matter of fact. Within kind of this, it's an autonomous region, but it's under Azeri. It's within the Azeri borders. Let's put it that way. It's autonomous in the sense that it's disconnected from Azerbaijan, right? Historically, if we want to talk about it, again, historically it's Armenian land, there's actually a very good article in The Guardian about cultural. If anybody can pull this up, just Google it and pull it up and put it in there. You could it's probably under the title of like biggest cultural genocide of the last century. One of the things that they did is they went around. There's something that Armenians kind of pride themselves on. It's called a khachkar. A khachkar is a big giant stone. It could be very small as well, of crosses. Okay, Armenian crosses, and Armenian crosses are very unique. The closest thing that comes to it would be like a Celtic cross, and what they went around and did was break all of these historic Armenian landmarks, pretty much historic sites, these stones, and it's recorded pretty well. And so The Guardian has an article on this that you can see.
You mean this one, Monumental Loss, Azerbaijan, and the Worst Cultural Genocide of the 21st Century?
That's right. Yes, that's the one.
Let's see.
That's the one. So again, Nakhichevan is technically under Azerbaijan. Armenians, there's no Armenians living in Nakhichevan currently, but there were. As a matter of fact, there was a large amount of Jews that also lived in Nakhichevan, for those who are interested in that region, that were kind of left over from the Babylonian Persian days.
Yeah, I'm just reading a little of this article here. It says a damning new report details an attempted erasure by Azerbaijan of its Armenian cultural heritage, including the destruction of tens of thousands of UNESCO-protected ancient stone carvings. The 21st century's most extensive campaign of cultural cleansing to date may not have happened in Syria, as you might assume, but a largely ignored part of the Transcaucasian Plateau. According to a lengthy report published in the art journal Hyperallergetic in February, the Azerbaijani government has, over the past 30 years, been engaging in a systematic erasure of the country's historic Armenian heritage. This official, albeit covert, destruction of cultural and religious artifacts exceeds Islamic State's self-promotional dynamiting of Palmyra, according to the report's authors. So they're saying that as far as destroying artifacts and so on, trying to wipe things out, these guys are actually worse than ISIS.
Yeah,
ISIS was going through museums smashing stuff.
Yeah, so David, let me say something here that's very important. If you listen to the propaganda that's coming out of Azerbaijan, and there's a couple of things let me mention that I'll put into perspective. Azerbaijan has had a father and a son ruling the country, right? It was the father, now it's the son, for the last 30 years, give or take a couple of years in the beginning. The current dictator of Azerbaijan, right, made his wife the vice president of the country. That should tell you enough about the democracy that exists in this country. When you listen to them, I feel very sorry for the Azeri people, okay, because they've literally changed history. They have a completely alternate form of history. When I listen to Azeris talk, I just kind of, my soul cries out and says, just pick up any book on world history from anyone except someone from Azerbaijan or Turkey. There's seriously been a erasing of history. I'll give you this. So there's a church in Artsakh, okay? It's called Dadi Vank, okay? Now Dadi is from what history tells us, was a disciple of Thaddeus, okay, who was martyred for proclaiming the gospel. So Thaddeus and Bartholomew was martyred in Armenia, and Dadi, a disciple of Thaddeus, was also martyred. His grave is there. I visited the church when I was there. And there's a number of monasteries like this, okay, dating all the way back to the 1st century. When you listen to Azeris talk about this, they'll say things, oh, that's not Armenian. They'll say two things. It's either Azeri Christians, which is really, really funny to the historical record, okay? Or they'll say something like, before Azerbaijan ever kind of came into existence, there was a people group that was living there. It's called Caucasian Albania, by the way. And so it'll be like, oh, it was theirs. Armenia wasn't there. But no serious historian actually would agree with any one of these claims. But they're landlocked. They're in the sense of like their ideas, right? Their government doesn't allow them to study and learn. From a very young age, they're indoctrinated to hate Armenians. As a matter of fact, in school, there's videos of this, you guys can search online, where a teacher is asking, who is our enemy? And the children say, Armenians, right? I mean, when you got 7, 8-year-olds, you're indoctrinating in this sense, yeah, they're gonna grow up and think this stuff because they have a completely alternate view of history. So I don't blame them in the sense, because they're in ignorance, where they're like, oh no, this is historic, Azeri lands. And it's like, okay, so let's see how far your people group can go and how far the Armenian people group can go and compare it. And then there's all sorts of funny stories they try to come up with and saying these things. So that cultural genocide that we're talking about, destroying these monuments, destroying these, the remnants of identity there. And I would say the same thing of what Turkey is doing right now, right? With the conversion of the Hagia Sophia, with the conversion of ancient Christian sites into mosques. That's exactly what's going on. It's an erasure. It's saying, no, these things are ours now. We're going to convert them. It's going to look very Turkic. It's going to look very Islamic. And we're going to get rid of all historic traces of these things.
A couple of comments here. Manny says, hey, David and Arthur, you're missing a vital point in this discussion. Erdogan has strongly been pushing the Muslim Brotherhood and is currently seen as a figurehead of a newer and stronger caliphate. So, yeah, I understand. Matter of fact, let me pull that comment up here. So, yeah, when when Erdogan, declared that Hagia Sophia is a mosque and not a museum, I kind of understood that. But right now, for him to be helping Azerbaijan, I would understand Iran helping Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan is a Shia majority nation, whereas Turkey is Sunni majority, and Sunnis and Shias usually don't get along. So what in the world is going on here?
Okay, so again, like I said, the complication of the people group in the region. Before I say that, let's recognize, and people should be aware of the fact, that northern Iran is largely populated by Azeri Turks. Okay, northern Iran is largely populated by Azeri Turks. That's extremely important for people to know.
Turks.
Azeri Turks. Mm-hmm. So they're Azeri. We should distinguish between those. The connection here is that Azerbaijan is Turkic. Turks always see the Azeris as their brothers, where Iranians are ethnically distinct from Azeris. Iranians might have the religious kind of component in connection, but not necessarily the ethnic kind of component. One of the things that, and this now is my opinion, one of the things I think keeps Iran on their toes on this issue is that if Azerbaijan can claim these lands and say it's historically ours and stuff, they can very easily also claim northern Iran and say, that's where Azeri people have always lived. It's our land. We want that too. And that's why I think Iran is, technically Iran kind of tries to stay in the middle on this stuff, even though in the early 90s it supported Armenia. I think it does lean towards supporting Armenia. Someone else asked a question I want to address that goes alongside with it. Someone said, is Georgia going to back Armenia up? No, Georgia has not backed Armenia. Georgia is a Christian nation, for those who don't know. But I think Georgia's got a lot of trade that goes through it between Turkey, Azerbaijan. And so it kind of tries to stay out of it, but it hasn't. It was actually allowing Turkish planes to take mercenaries and jihadis into Azerbaijan to fight the Armenians. As far as I read, as of like 3-4 days ago, they made a statement that we're not going to allow anybody to transport anything through our lands. But I don't know whether that's actually been the case or not. It's very disheartening to see that Georgia is not supporting Armenia on this issue.
Yeah. So on a superficial level, if I were looking at this, it would make sense in that you have the sort of borders between Muslim-controlled areas and Christian-controlled areas, or Muslim-majority areas and Christian-majority areas. And what you find is that Muslims in many of those areas, they are constantly trying to push those borders back. So this is kind of anywhere. Oh, and it doesn't have to be Christians either. So if you look at India, you have Muslims in the north, and then Hindus south of that, and the Muslims in many of the Muslims in those areas are trying to continue pushing further and further south. Nigeria, Nigeria's a border area where you have Muslims in the north and Christians in the south, and Muslims are constantly trying to expand and push. So if I were looking at this and didn't have you breaking this down, I would look and I'd say, okay, you have Christian Georgia, Christian Armenia, and then Muslims on the west, east, and south. Obviously, they want to push Armenia. They want to push through Armenia because then they can continue just pushing north as they expand. But you're saying it's more of a like an ethnic situation where, hey, those are our people on that side. They're our brothers on the opposite side.
Yes and no. I mean, again, it's complicated as to why Iran operates the way it does on this issue. Maybe it's a bit counterintuitive or something like that. One thing I will say this: history has proven that the Turkic peoples, not the Iranian people, have committed genocide against Armenians, and specifically Armenian Christians. Now, I'll put it this way: during the 1915 genocide, if a person converted to Islam, their life was spared. Their last name was changed. They became something Oghlu or something like that, very Turkic last name, and it was done. So definitely there's a religious component to this, but I don't want to be an individual who says it's just a religious component, because that's just not true. Obviously, there's an ethnic component, but again, we are looking at this from Western eyes. It's very important to look at it from Eastern eyes, right? Looking at it from that perspective, where your religious identity and your ethnic identity are the same. Where if you're Armenian, you're a Christian, right? If you want to insult someone in both these, by the way, if you want to insult someone in Turkey, you call them Armenian. If you want to insult someone in Armenia, you call them a Turk. And I've heard this from Turkish Christians. Even when a Turk becomes a Christian, they will call them, oh, you're Ermeni, right? You're Armenian. Like you've betrayed your people, you've become Armenian. But they haven't become Armenian. They're Turks. They're just Christians. But you have to understand the mindset here. The mindset is your ethnic identity and your religious identity are the same. And so it's very difficult to separate those things and say, oh, it's just the ethnic issue. And I've seen Azeri propaganda and Turkish propaganda where it says, oh, no, this is just the ethnic issue. That's not true. If it was an ethnic issue, then why would people during the genocide who converted to Islam, why were their lives spared? If it was just the ethnic issue. So
some sort of combination then.
Yes.
All right, here's another interesting question. Rebri77 said, what does Arthur think about Putin's role in this situation, and if he will back Armenia if Erdogan gets involved? So as far as I can tell, again, you can correct me if I'm wrong, so Turkey is backing Azerbaijan for this dispute, in the situation over this disputed area, but Russia is supposed to back Armenia, or is it supposed to take care of that particular region? I know Russia has some sort of obligation here.
Yeah. So there is an issue here between right, like the big players are getting involved now as people are asking these questions. Number one, on the Turkish-Armenia border, there's Russian troops. That's partly to keep the Turks from just, they're 80 million population and Armenia has a 3 million population, and just coming in there. And so the Russian troops there kind of keep the peace. Russia has a very good relationship with Armenia. Now, Russia also sells weapons to Azerbaijan. So it's not like it has a horrible relationship with Azerbaijan. That's not true. Some kind of geopolitical analysts and stuff are saying that Erdogan is trying to let Russia know, I want this region, I want control over this region. So we'll see what Putin does. So far, it's been very general comments where, we're strongly condemning this violence and we're telling both countries to stop the fighting and stuff like that. It hasn't really taken sides. It's not like it's landed troops or anything like that into Armenia. So we will see. I don't know what the Russians will do, but I hope they get involved, because we do need some of these countries to get involved, or else Armenia is really just left alone to deal with this themselves. And the United States isn't doing much either.
Yeah, that's. I'm looking right now at the. Matter of fact, I should go and pull this up. Maybe we'll read a couple of paragraphs here of this article in the New York Times. Let me see here. So here we have the New York Times. Yerevan, Armenia, taking shelter in a hospital basement. 19-year-old George Alexanian can hear the suicide drones buzzing overhead in the city of Stepanakert. So they're using suicide drones. So I guess these are just drones loaded with explosives or something?
Yes, they are. And let me complicate this a little more. A lot of the drones that Azerbaijan's buying are being sold by Israel. Now, someone posted this, and I think it's so heart-wrenching, right? It's the statement goes as far like this. It says, we're seeing grandchildren of Holocaust survivors selling weapons to the grandchildren of genocide perpetrators who are using those weapons against the grandchildren of genocide survivors. With the Israel is selling lots of arms.
Wow.
Um,
So you're saying these?
I don't know. It boggles me.
Yeah. Yeah. If so, that needs to be exposed. So let's read a little more. A few days ago, he said one of them one of the suicide drones headed toward the hospital, but was struck down before it could explode. Yet being there, he told me, is better than staying home, where every strike felt like an earthquake. His sister is a doctor working upstairs and sleeping in the hallway because the beds are all full. We get used to it, he said, but it's hard to live not knowing if you're safe. Workers hurry. This is just the introduction. I wanted to get to this part about the situation here. Workers hurry out of other basements for a few hours, then rush back down to the shelter. 11 days into an escalating fight between Armenia and Azerbaijan, Stepanakert is being pummeled with missiles and drone fire. One building that still stands is the home of the National Assembly of the Republic of Artsakh, a country that has never been recognized by the wider world.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, what the world really needs to know is that Azerbaijan is committing war crimes. They are using weapons and they're bombing civilian populations. Like I said, today they bombed the cathedral in Shushi. Why would you bomb a cathedral? Why bomb a church? It makes no sense. There's no tanks in it. There's no missiles in it. It's a church. I've been in that church. It's a beautiful, beautiful church. I've been in Stepanakert. It's a beautiful city, and they pretty much used carpet bombing there. One of the things they do that's really, really, whether we want to say, well, hey, this is the way Islamic fanatics think. Well, there's these bombs they'll drop that have these red and green ribbons on them. I believe they're red and green, where they don't explode, and it's really meant for children to go and pull on those ribbons and then blow up. Where there's pictures coming through where these old guys who know what those are because they've seen them before are just collecting them off the streets. They've used carpet bombing, which is again against international laws. You can't do that, and that's what they're doing. And they don't allow media. Armenia's invited foreign media to come and go on the borders. As a matter of fact, the French sent a couple, and then two of them got hurt. The Azeris hit these two French journalists, where Azerbaijan's not allowing any foreign journalists to go into their land unless they're pro-Turkey, pro-Azeri. They've also shut down their social media in their country, by the way, with the exception of Twitter, which they're probably monitoring. So it's not like they're getting lots of information coming in. There's lots of propaganda that's being produced where they're saying we conquered this, we conquered that. They're showing pictures and all this stuff. Again, people can look. We live in the age of the internet, and you can search this stuff up. It's on Twitter, it's on Instagram. Share it. I must warn you, if you do share it, I have a number of American friends, non-Armenian friends who share this stuff, and they have been bombarded by Azeri and Turk trolls. Bombarded. One of the things that happened to some celebrity, Elton John posted about this, and he took it down immediately. Cardi B posted something and took it down and apologized for it. That's how much pressure these celebrities go under. I don't have much hope with these individuals anyways, by the way, just using them as an example. But there's a lot more who have done that and just apologized and took it down. Someone mentioned the missile, by the way. Azerbaijan is using missiles called LoRa. Yes, they are. That's, again, an Israeli-made missile.
Ashu here said, I remember when Arthur was on with Sam Shamoun the first time, and he said to watch this region for a flare-up. I can't believe he got proven right so fast.
Yeah, that was in August. That was in August. Now, again, I was in Armenia. You could feel the tension. The reason why I said that is because of what happened in July. That was very strange and weird, where Azerbaijan would launch attacks into Armenia proper. That had never happened, and that to me said how serious they are and what they're doing. And let me say this: a number of documents were leaked from 2003. I think last year they were leaked, Turkish documents, where the Turks were talking about invading Armenia and Greece. Again, this is a regional thing. Like people, you should not think like, oh, this is Armenia and then Azerbaijan. No, this is Armenia and Greece and Azerbaijan and Turkey and Iran and Russia and Egypt and France. Like this is huge. The potential for this can be extremely huge, and this is why we need people to be well informed, to know what they're talking about. And do your research, know what's going on in that region, and post about it. If you want to look at Syria as kind of, a very sad roadmap. By the way, I have Syrian friends, I have Armenian friends from Syria. I met a lot of Armenians in Armenia who had come to Armenia from Syria, whose grandparents were genocide survivors because of ISIS. I met a guy in Armenia who was held hostage by ISIS. This stuff is all interconnected. You think these people are going to, God forbid, but you think if these people take over these lands, they're going to go in there and say, hey, we just want to live very peacefully with you? Does the West actually believe that? Or considering the fact that they're bringing in these, Turkey denies this, but Europe and America are all talking about this, bring in these Syrian jihadis and having them fight the Armenians. You think these guys are going to go in there and not rape women and kill children and forcibly convert them into Islam? You think that's not what their ideology, if you think that's not what their ideology teaches, then you are a fool. You are as naive and stupid as they come.
Let's read a little more here. Known internationally as Nagorno-Karabakh, the tiny Armenian separatist enclave in Azerbaijan is at the center of a dangerous conflict that has drawn in Turkey and Russia and claimed hundreds of lives without engagement from the United States, whose attention to the region has slipped. The situation could spiral out of control. And so basically, the idea here is you're kind of seeing the beginning of skirmishes, and then it's a question of who gets involved.
So it's not a skirmish anymore. This is a full-on reignition of the war. This is the largest escalation that's happened. By the way, let me put into context here, numbers-wise. There's 150,000 people that live in Artsakh. Armenia has a population of about 3 million people. Turkey has a population of 80 million people, and Azerbaijan has a population of 10 million. Okay, so you will continuously, a lot of Armenians will post and say things like, hey, it's 3 million, 150,000 fighting against 90 million, right? Even if Azerbaijan was just alone, they have, triple the population of Armenia. Now, they're, again, just about the fighting, it seems like they're taking heavy losses. They're an oil-rich country, so they're a rich country. And they've used their riches over the last 30 years to, develop, I guess, like modern weapons, like suicide drones. By the way, it just doesn't, some people were posting some comments here as I was paying attention. It doesn't escape me that it's Muslims using suicide drones. And it shouldn't escape anyone. It just sounds the kind of thing that they would do.
Yeah, historically you have the suicide bomber, but man, if you don't want to, go and do it yourself, then you can have the suicide drone. Yeah. Quick question here. Blake said in the super chat, as a Christian, are we obliged to support Israel and its foreign policy decisions because Israel is God's chosen people? I would say no. You don't have to support every decision that the modern nation of Israel makes.
Let me put this in context. There's a Christians comment on this stuff, and I think the preachers usually do a disservice to this. Did the prophets in the Old Testament support the decision of the Israelite governments? Most of the time, no. It just shows how ignorant Christians are of the Bible. One of the things I've been doing over the last like 3 to 4 months is reading the prophetic books in the Old Testament for my devotional time. Just read them and see how often the kings and the leaders of Israel are completely out of the will of God, and how much the prophets are rebuking them and telling them God is against them and is not blessing them and is not for them. That set aside, I do not think, and I'm not, Christians disagree on this, but I am not of the opinion that Israel is the chosen people of God. I think Christians are the chosen people of God. The elect is a term that is used of Israel in the Old Testament and is used of Christians in the New Testament. God used Israel to bring about the Messiah, and used Abraham to be a blessing to the world as he had promised to Abraham. If, depending on your end times view, God could potentially use Israel in the future. If that is your end times view, it's not necessarily mine, but that's okay. I have friends whose view that is, and that's okay. Are you supposed to blindly follow the modern nation of Israel with their decision making? Absolutely not. As you are not supposed to follow the United States or any government, the government Armenia, the government Azerbedjian, the government Turkey, just because they're Christians or just because they're this and that. Look at their decisions, look at whether it's Christ honoring or not, and make your decisions that way.
I would agree. I look at it as I would look at other nations. The people who live in Israel, and very diverse area. You have Jews, Muslims, Christians, all living in Israel. But those are people who are created in the image of God. They have human rights, and so, you would support their right to exist. If they're making a right decision, then you support that. Whatever is tending to the good of the people there, or the surrounding people, you support that. If someone's doing something wrong, you investigate it. And again, just as Arthur said, is same thing with the United States, same thing with Great Britain, same thing with Israel. Governments sometimes make really good decisions, sometimes they make bad decisions. And my goodness, if you say, "Oh, this people is immune from criticism," that's not a good idea there.
Especially the way I look at it is when the people don't even name the name of Christ. I mean, here's one thing to look at. Look at Palestinian Christians and the way they're treated in Israel. Even beyond that, look at Jewish Christians and the way they're treated in Israel. Are they treated like, "Hey, you're our brother, come with us"? Or are they shunned? Are they persecuted? Right? Go do your research. And I think there's a kind of a naivety when it comes to American Christians, and they really turn a blind eye to Israel and the decisions that Israel makes. It could make right decisions, it could make wrong decisions. And I'm going to judge it case on case, as with any government. I think that's being wise, and that's actually being Christ honoring.
Let's check some more of this out. The conflict is an unresolved leftover from the Soviet Union. In 1923, communist rulers placed the Nagorno-Karabakh and its ethnic Armenian majority within
who are you reading this from? Who wrote this?
This is the New York Times.
These guys are doing their best to really not state the fact. It's not communist rulers, it's Stalin. Okay, I don't know if they're staying away from saying Stalin.
I don't think anyone tries to defend Stalin.
That's partly why they're not saying Stalin, because people would say, "Hey, wait, hang on here, man. That guy's a maniac."
So you're saying they might, if someone finds out, no, it's like specifically Stalin, they might say, "Well, that's got to be bogus."
Yeah,
you gotta redraw that border.
Yeah, it's kind of like saying, "Oh, Hitler drew this arbitrary lines with Poland."
So you say the Germans did it?
Yeah, so bad.
Let's see. Giving it.
By the way, let me say this: a lot of the news that's been coming out. Some Armenian comedians actually made fun of this from Armenia. Is they trying to be very neutral, clashes flare up in in this disputed territory and fighting erupts, and these guys were making fun of it in the sense of is there no cause to does it just kind of erupt? Someone had to attack. Mm-hmm. Right now, the funny thing is that the Azeris are saying Armenia invaded. You're telling me a population of 150,000, let's say with the backing, if that, with 3 million, invaded a population of 10 million with the backing of 80 million? Like, does that make any logical sense to anyone? When the whole time, this autonomous region, right, Artsakh is saying, we want to govern ourselves, just recognize that and admit that, and then we will live at peace, we'll be okay with you. It's all good. Right? Like, they don't want to go invade Baku and say this is Armenian territory. Like, nobody wants to do that.
Let's see. As the Soviet Union was collapsing in 1991, the region declared its own independence, setting off a war that lasted until a ceasefire in 1994. That's what you mentioned, all of that. That held for 26 years, though clashes have broken out over the past 4 years. This round of hostilities, which started on September 27th, is different. What had previously been theoretically possible but highly improbable military actions, Azerbaijani drones flying within 20 miles of Yerevan, Armenia's capital, or an Armenian strike on a military base in Azerbaijan's second city, Ganja, were quickly carried out. The next targets could be oil and gas facilities in Azerbaijan or Yerevan and Azerbaijan's capital, Baku.
Let me clarify something here. I think this reporter is very unfair. Armenia didn't attack the city of Ganja. They attacked a military airbase where all the drones were flying from and where their fighter planes were flying from. Arguably, by the way, some intelligence is saying that they're Turkish fighters, F-16 fighters, that were flying from that airbase. Armenia specifically warned the city and told the population, leave the city, we will be targeting military sites in your big city. Sorry, not Armenia, I should rephrase that. The Republic of Artsakh said that. The Republic of Artsakh, their president came out and made for a couple of days, multiple announcements. We're going to go after military sites in big cities, leave. People actually fled from Ganja. And what ended up happening is that the military airbase, which was also a makeshift international airport, it's not really international, it flies to like 3 countries in that nearby, but I guess that qualifies as international, was hit, where on the other side, the Azerbaijanis have been cluster bombing the city of Stepanakert, just residents. And that's the difference. So the Armenians the Armenians in Artsakh never bombed the city. As a matter of fact, there's a couple of really funny pictures that have come out. Supposedly they're rockets that didn't blow up, and you can literally see they drilled a hole in the ground, put a rocket in there. They actually have a little stick next to it, and there's no like gravel or anything outside. Like, it's staged. It's obviously staged, trying to show that Armenians are targeting civilians. And when there's tons of videos and images that are coming of bombs just dropping all over the place in Stepanakert. And this is what happens when you get dictators in power and they're controlling the media and they're actually just, throwing out this propaganda nonsense.
All right, read a little more here. I just wanted to get down to see what it's saying about Russia and the United States here. The threat of mutually assured destruction. The threat of mutually assured destruction was supposed to be a deterrent that kept each side in check. Now it risks becoming reality. Azerbaijan, encouraged and materially supported by Turkey, has vowed to fight until its control of Nagorno-Karabakh is assured. Armenians, for their part, have vowed to give their last drop of blood to maintain the region's independence. So that looks like the making of a bloodbath. The fighting has expanded beyond anything seen in the past few decades. If it develops into an Azerbaijani attack on Armenian soil, it would be likely to bring the direct participation of Russia, which is treaty-bound to protect Armenia. At that point, with Turkey and Russia on opposing sides, the wider region could be engulfed by war. And then we have here the United States. It was the United States that once led the effort to avoid such a disaster. As one of the co-chairs of the Minsk Group, the body created by the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe to negotiate a settlement to the conflict. After the ceasefire in 1994, the group began intense rounds of diplomacy, including the promising peace talks at Key West, Florida in 2001, overseen by a sharp cast of American diplomats. So it sounds like America is just not interested in getting involved in the current conflict. So it looks like a lot's going to come down to what Russia decides to do if the conflict continues.
Yeah, America needs to get involved in this, and in a fair way. My continuous fear, is for America to choose the wrong side on this, and because it has air bases in Turkey, to kind of go alongside with that, and then because it doesn't like the Iranian mullahs. By the way, Iranians don't like the Iranian mullahs. I know lots of Iranians. My parents were born and raised in Iran. They were there when the when the mullahs take over during the Islamic Revolution. So it's not just that the United States doesn't like it. A large population of Iranians don't like them. Just because of that, I'm always under the fear that the United States will go with Azerbaijan and Turkey on this because it wants to kind of counter Russia and Iran, and they would be in the wrong if it ever came down to that. Hopefully not.
All right.
Again, somebody here again said on the comment section, Tundra M. It says it's not a religious conflict. You're very silly. I'm being very nice here.
Yeah, maybe Tundra wasn't here earlier because we kind of went through that. We discussed that it's kind of a combination. All right, so I guess we're kind of up to date now, and the coming days and weeks will basically decide what's going to happen here in the near future. What do you think people should do in the meantime? Because I don't want to see a bloodbath there. Yeah. And when you look at the history of Armenia, we don't want to see that place get swallowed up by an alliance of Turkey and Azerbaijan and so on. So, but at the same time, we're not Russian, and so we have no say-so over what Russians. Is there anything you'd recommend for people to do here? Because people have been pointing out this isn't being talked about much. There are some articles that you can find, but I haven't been seeing this on the news, and it's a situation where you have a Muslim country and a Christian country right there on the upper edge of the Middle East going to war in a situation where Russia and Turkey could be on opposite sides of this. And you have this report here in the New York Times, and you have other articles, but it's not really a serious. Pence, the fly on Pence's head is bigger news than all of this.
So many people were actually tweeting that and posting that on Instagram. Literally, it's very sad. CNN, as a matter of fact, one of the things that happened here in Los Angeles is that CNN reported some false reporting, essentially, which is not uncommon of them, but where Armenians shut down the streets in front of CNN for a number of days. I think it was like up to maybe a week until CNN actually reported correctly as to what's going on and who the aggressors in the situation are. One of the things I want to encourage people, given the world we live in, guys, this is not just a war that is happening on the front lines with soldiers shooting back and forth, but there's also a war being had on the internet, on Twitter and Instagram. Go and just search Armenia or Azerbaijan on Twitter. I've tried this, okay? One of the things that comes up is you will see continuous accounts that were created like 3 days ago, 2 days ago, 5 days ago. That is like 0 followers and stuff like that. Just blasting content supporting Azerbaijan. So they're I would say probably doing a better job. Probably they have paid individuals who are sitting in front of a computer and just doing this day and night. Programmers have created bots that are just doing this. So we need people. Armenians need people, especially non-Armenians, to post about this, post articles, post pictures, talk about the situation, get the word out, tag news stations and agencies and all that stuff, so that it trends, so that it becomes news, and people actually talk about it. Given the fact that we're Christians, I want to encourage all the Christians to pray. Now, here's what to pray for: peace, because that's what we want as Christians. Paul says we desire peace. We desire to live at peace with all men. And this is the heart and the desire of the Armenian people. Listen, not everyone in Armenia is Christian, right? In the sense that we would understand being born again of the Spirit, but they at least identify as Christian. A vast majority of individuals identify as that. And so there's a Christian psyche in Armenia where, yeah, we want to live at peace. We want to live at peace with Azerbaijan. We want to live at peace with Turkey, Iran, Georgia. We want peace. And so my prayer has been peace. My prayer has also been that God would come and be a defender of the righteous in this situation, because I think God does that. So please pray. The final thing I would mention is if you want to financially support, there's a link in the description box that David has been so gracious enough to put, himnadaram.org. So you can go and give towards that. Okay, so www.himnadaram.org. As a matter of fact, I think it's up to like 80 million that's already been raised. There's a lot of Armenian business people around the world that are matching people's giving and all that stuff. So that's just general giving going towards the situation right now. The financial need is extremely important. So please give towards that. But information and getting the news out there and sharing this video, sharing short there's a lot of short videos, historical explanations on Instagram, on YouTube. Share them to your social medias. Educate people. Let the world be educated about what is going on in this region, because it's really a global issue. It really is a global issue. It's not just a regional issue. And if we want peace in the world, I think we should be, especially as Christians, invested into this.
Ola Fasola here said, let me get this up. Can you lead us to good history resources so we can study this? Or are there any websites or other sources you'd recommend for people to sort of get on top of this issue?
Listen, I would say even a very basic Wikipedia search, other than the fact of me giving you books on the history of the Armenian people or something like that. I would say go read up on Wikipedia. If you really want to follow the trail of sources on the bottom, you can do that. The sources are pretty good on this issue on Wikipedia. I know a lot of people look down on Wikipedia, but sometimes the information is really good.
No, with Wikipedia, it kind of depends on the topic. Like there's stuff on mathematics and probability, and a lot of the stuff on philosophy is excellent. So it kind of depends on the topic that's being covered and who's moderating the page.
That's right. Yeah. So go look it up. Follow the resources there. It's very difficult for me just to throw out book. I mean, there's a book that was written. It has a blue cover. It's called The Armenians, but it's pretty dated now. I think it was written in like the early 90s, but that's a pretty good history of the Armenian people. If I come across some stuff, so things aren't like popping up into my head, I can definitely send those to David and he can put it in the description box, some of the links. I'll try to do that. How about that?
Yeah.
I'll try to find some resources, some websites that you guys can look specifically on this conflict and read about. And then David can put that in the description box over the next day or so.
All right. So again, ladies and gentlemen, there's a link to Arthur's YouTube channel. And if you want to, and you said you kind of cover a lot of issues. So you're not just covering this issue. You're as an apologetics channel. So
it is an apologetics channel. Yeah.
So you can check out his channel, and and he'll send me some links to go ahead, and I'll either put them in the description or I'll put them in a pinned post for people who want to study more. All right. Any final thoughts before we sign off here, Arthur?
No. Thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate the fact that you had me on, man. Pretty quickly. I know how busy you are, and you're using your drill for good reasons, for good purposes. I see. So you're very meticulous, and I guess maybe you can get into woodworking with that drill press you got.
Oh yeah. I think I'm gonna have to get a bandsaw next, because you can do all sorts of stuff with a bandsaw too. You can make book safes, right? You can say, hey, here's how you make a book safe. You just drill out the middle there and so on. So all kinds of awesome projects coming up. All right, thanks to Arthur for joining us. Thanks to everyone. Whatever your side, whatever side you're on this issue, we're happy you sat here with us and listened. And so pray for this situation. Do anything you can by becoming informed and sharing information with others who aren't informed. And that's just a good mindset for all situations. Learn some things well and then share what you've learned. And
Right.
if enough people do that, we would solve a lot of problems. All right. Lord willing, I should be back tomorrow going live with Sam Shamoon again. So talk to you then.